Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As we approach midlife, we try to find many ways that we want to achieve the goals in life that would really bring us the most ultimate fulfillment. It's kind of exciting when you think to yourself that you want a better career, for instance, that might bring you the kind of income with more freedom to travel around the world and be able to have the enjoyment that you deserve when it comes to achieving that very thing. How about a loving relationship? Finding that perfect partner, but finding out that you just need a few things to tweak just before you get ready to land that beautiful relationship that you're hoping for. The self-help industry is a multi-million-dollar industry yearly. That is, many people are seeking pilgrimages as they go out to find books that will help them achieve their goals. They attend seminars, or they go on these weekend retreats that can be quite expensive, only to find that, generally speaking, around 97% of the people who go to these particular things to find their goals to be achieved find failure. So why is it that 97% of the people who go out in the self-help industry to be able to improve their lives fail? Well, joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is author of the book Beyond Willpower. And after more than 2 decades of clinical experience, he found a way that he could actually reverse that, where now he has a 97% success rate of helping people achieve their goals. We're going to find out what this is and what we can do to be able to do this very thing. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Dr. Alexander Lloyd, joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. Dr. Lloyd, thank you for joining us today.
Daniel, thank you so much for having me. I've been excited about being here.
Now, it's very exciting to have you on the program. Now, I was really intrigued, first of all, with your experience in the book. I've got to say that of most of the stories that I've read, I don't think I've found anyone, when it came to a relationship, that was quite as thorough about a successful relationship as you originally were with you and your wife. You got to share that story. That one was really an interesting one for me.
You know, Daniel, thank you for that. I've been interviewed a number of times, and no one has ever brought that up but you. and I completely agree with you. My wife. Before we got married, we decided, there's 50% of people get divorced. That statistic goes back a ways, and then the statistics are that even among those who don't get a divorce, a small percentage of them are really extremely happy. And so we decided we're going to do it right. And the first date we ever had, we went to the park, put a blanket on the ground, and sat there and talked for 4 hours about everything. And I mean, hopes, dreams, the future, what we thought we wanted, kids or no kids, how many kids, where to live, what to do. We, as we dated, we did premarital counseling voluntarily. We took all these personality tests and compared. Our dates, instead of a lot of typical dates, we would read books on our own and make notes. And then our dates, a lot of times, we'd go out to dinner and things like that. But a lot of times what we would discuss would be, my notes of the book versus your notes of the book. And typically they were books about relationship and being happy and, that sort of thing. And so when we finally, in 1986, said I do, we thought, man, we have done it right, and we're going to be the 1% that stays together, but not only that, but is incredibly happy. So a little less than 3 years later, when my wife kicked me out of the house, and which was a shock to me, but I did know without a doubt that neither one of us were happy. It was kind of head spinning. How did this happen when we thought we had done everything right?
Now, it's funny because what really rings in that sentence, or what you had just said, was the very thing that we touch quite a bit on the program here, and that is, I did what I thought was the thing that would work, that would actually ring true.
Right.
And a lot of people, by the time they reach midlife, there seems to be this anxiety within them that says, most of my life I've been listening to other people tell me how I should go about doing things, whether it's a career or a love relationship, whatever it is about life. Your parents are always giving you advice as you're growing up, especially in your 20s and 30s. There's the education system doing the very same thing, that you're supposed to go and get a good education, then go out and find a good career, then settle down and have a family. And so you're doing all these things that outside world tells you are the things you should be doing that pretty much would guarantee success. Then why don't I feel successful? And it's time to break that and do something different. And so you literally have put that stamp back on there, as many of our guests have. You're right. Maybe that's really that midlife crisis, is we're just sick and tired of following a particular paradigm that everybody says is best for us, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab life by the, and I'm going to go and I'm going to find my own way.
Daniel, I think you're right. I think a lot of times the midlife crisis is a very healthy thing, and it's exactly what you said. It's not that sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not just that you get to midlife and say, I want a new this or that. It's that you get to midlife and realize, what have I been doing the last 20 years? This isn't where I thought I would end up. Mm-hmm. Doing the right things, and so you start to question, were those really the right things in the first place? And you search for, okay, what is it all about?
Now, it's interesting because just recently I was talking with a guest on the program who runs a school for hypnosis.
Uh-huh.
And she says, what I do, because people kind of sometimes misunderstand hypnosis, is she says, I truly unhypnotize you. And I thought that was such a profound thing to say when you consider how we truly live in hypnosis quite a bit.
Right. And I would say, irregardless of hypnosis, that she's right, that a lot of us kind of go through life like we're hypnotized, just doing stuff, and if someone were to really kind of pin us to the wall and say, okay, I know this is what you're doing, and it's because your parents or your boss or whoever, but have you really thought about why are you doing that, and where is that taking you long term, and is there another alternative? And so, yeah, that is very profound. I like that.
Now, I like what you just said. Again, you're really feeding our listeners nuggets here, and it's because it's something that I kind of try to help our listeners become aware of, and that is, are you going after things that are truly what you want? And, one of the things that we've brought up here on the program is the suggestion of subliminal persuasion, especially when it comes to getting people to make choices. And we've all heard about the experiments back in the 1950s of, every 7 frames they would flash a box of popcorn in a movie theater to encourage people to go and buy, okay? Now, a lot of people take a look at that and they say, well, we heard about that, but that wasn't successful. Subliminal, advertising really doesn't work. And I say, well, we explored this actually over a couple of programs some time ago and said, well, let's take a look at why you are motivated to do the things you do. Do you really try to maintain or go out there and buy that dream home because it's something you really want to do? Or have we positioned ourselves through especially political rhetoric every 4 years that tells us this is what the American dream is, which it isn't, of course.
Right.
Having a nice vehicle. You go out there, and I've seen even late teens and early 20-somethings put themselves in unreasonable debt to go out and buy that car that they look beautiful when they're driving, but yet they're full of anxiety as they're doing it. And so you lead to that question, and you just hit it right on the point. Are you going after the goals that are truly something from within inside of you that you really want, Or is there an anxiety that somehow has been created inside of you to make you feel that until you have achieved those things that you want, it'll relieve the stress that you're feeling from not having it?
Right, right. I completely agree, Daniel. In fact, after my wife kicked me out of the house and I kind of hit bottom and started searching for real solutions and started finding some, the one thing I started doing is I started trying to help other people, and it's the longest I've ever done anything in my professional life, and I've been doing it for about 26 years now, was asking people, what do you want more than anything else right now?
Mm-hmm.
And that started with just one person or a few people, but more recently I've been able at times to ask thousands at a time and things like that. And over that period of time, Daniel, 26 years, what I've found is that approximately 99% of people, the last group I did this with was 1,600 people, and 6 out of 1,600 gave the right answer when I explained to them kind of the principles of the book. 6 out of 1,600, and in 26 years, it's been less than 1%. And the point is what you just said. It's that, in my experience, 99+% of people don't know what they really, really, really want.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means they have the wrong goal. And if you've got the wrong goal, you're going to typically get a result that's not the result you would like either.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about, for instance, as you state in your book, that there have been these principles for achieving goals that for the last 70 years, pretty close to it, that we have been following, that they follow 3 principles, and for some reason these just aren't working because what it is, it's about willpower. Let's talk about that particular modality first, and then we'll begin to let the audience understand what it is we're talking about here, how you can change that.
Yeah. After I hit bottom, and I hit bottom after years of trying to do it right. I read the self-help books, you know, the Think and Grow Rich and the classic by Scott Peck that I'm blanking on.
The Road Less Traveled?
Yes, The Road Less Traveled, and on and on and on. And talked to people wiser than myself, looked at ancient manuscripts, I mean everything, and I was still failing in every single part of my life, even though I was trying to do it right. Very much mirroring what had happened with my wife and I in our marriage, which is what we started talking about a few minutes ago. And so one of the first things I did, Daniel, is see, okay, are other people having this experience? And sure enough, I found out, I talked to a gentleman named Ken Johnston, who at the time ran the largest personal development seminar company in North America. They passed Tony Robbins years ago. And Ken said, and still does today, this is the secret that the insiders in this self-help world only talk about behind closed doors. And I said, what's the secret?
Wait a minute, I spent all this money, but they're talking about something different? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and he said the secret is that we have a 97+% failure rate, but we get enough testimonials from the 3%, because that's tens of thousands of people a year, that it makes it seem like everybody's getting those results. So, and then I talked to a couple of other people, Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, who's a friend of mine, who laughed and said, it's not 97%, it's worse than that. But anyway, so then I started searching, Daniel, and what I found is that just about every book, program, seminar, I mean, name it, all the way back to Think and Grow Rich 75 years ago, has the same basic blueprint, which you said a minute ago, which is correct, and it's three things. Number one, decide what you want. Number two, develop a plan to get it and change the plan as needed. And number three, put the plan into action with your willpower until you get it. And you know, if you're listening to this and you think about that blueprint a while, probably the thing you're going to come away with is, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it does. And that's why the billions has been spent over 75 years on different ways of saying this same thing. But we've got a 97+% failure rate. Well, just in the last 6 years, I guess, the research has started coming out that proves why this is so. Dr. Dan Gilbert from Harvard University, and you see Dr. Gilbert on television commercials pretty frequently. One of them is for a big insurance company. But anyway, Dr. Gilbert wrote a best-selling book called Stumbling into Happiness that's based on his research on the campus at Harvard, wonderful research. And the conclusion of that research, and this is a direct quote, expectations are a happiness killer. And if you read his research, it's not just happiness, it's everything. It's your health, success, relationships, everything. And the reason is because the instant you have an external future goal expectation, it puts you internally into chronic stress. And if you're already in stress, it spikes your stress. Well, that's where our problems come from. If you've been alive on the planet for the last 30 years, you know that depending on the medical school, up to 95% of illness and disease is directly related to stress, cancer, heart disease, you name it. And then Dr. Lipton, Bruce Lipton from Stanford Medical School, based on his research, says that the odds of becoming successful at something that you've not been able to be successful at before without reprogramming your subconscious to remove what are really like computer viruses. Only I call them human hard drive viruses. They're beliefs in your subconscious that say, I can't do that, it's not going to work, I'm not tall enough, I'm not handsome enough, I'm going to get cancer because Dad did, or heart disease because Mom did, or whatever. And Dr. Lipton says, so trying to become successful at something strictly through willpower, when your subconscious mind is saying, ain't going to happen, that the odds of doing that successfully are approximately 1,000,000 to 1. Mm-hmm. Well, the three-step blueprint for the last 75 years, number 1 and 2 are expectation, number 3 is willpower. So it's a blueprint for failure, not success, and that's why we have the 97% failure rate.
Mm-hmm. You know, now there's an interesting example, and it isn't that I want to pick on the industry itself, but that really follows that same modality. In fact, it's kind of ancient in some ways and should be updated, especially with today's technology, but that is the multi-level or network marketing industry. And, you know, right. It's funny because, you know, I remember, and I've been involved in it, and I understand really it's the same modality that real estate and insurance used. You know, you right. Get out there, you drum up business, you get so much business, you have to bring somebody else in. You know, and that's really all it is. And the bottom line is that it was successful because it tapped into the most powerful form of advertising, which is word of mouth.
Right.
Now, a lot of times people, and I know that you're very familiar with this, but this is for our listeners out there, they come across somebody that seems like they've got it going on, and then you ask the question, how did you get to where you are here? And he's, well, I began promoting these health products or this service over here, and all of a sudden I was able to actually quit my job and improve my life and the like. And so they get allured by that story of the idea of firing their bosses, of course, better income, more time freedom. I mean, the promises are pretty much the same, and we all want the feeling of freedom. Now, this is what we're going to touch on here in a minute. But they get into this industry, they do what they're told to do by their upline, their supervisors, whatever you want to call them. A year later, they're not achieving the kind of success they're hearing about over there, for instance. Well, this guy got started 6 months later, he's just tearing it up. You must be missing the boat somewhere, even though you're making 30, 40, 100 phone, cold calls or face-to-faces a day. And it goes into this vicious cycle where eventually, after a year, if they even last that long, they just give up because they realize there must be something wrong with me if this is an unbroken business model.
Bingo! Something's wrong with me.
So,
Daniel, you are so right.
And it makes it funny because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Were you pursuing this because it was really something inside of you that you wanted? And of course it was. You wanted the feeling of freedom.
Right.
Now, that's what you talked about when you first were introducing the question about the genie in your book, and why people usually get that question wrong, because they're looking for that external thing. Usually, if you got a genie that could give you anything you want, what would that be? Well, most people would say more money. That's an external thing.
Right.
I remember asking my wife that question, because we were kind of talking about the book, and she says, well, what I would want most if I had a genie that snapped his finger, she says, I would just want peace.
Yeah.
And how profound that change in paradigm is. If you have peace, attracting all the things that you would really like to have, I think, would come a lot easier, wouldn't it?
It would. And what's interesting about that, Daniel, is that if you look at polls going back 50 years, Gallup polls and all sorts of things like that, where they ask people, what do you want most in life? By far, the most common response to that is happiness, okay? Mm-hmm. But, and this is why I started doing it the genie way, but in spite of that, when you ask people the question from the genie perspective, if Aladdin's genie was standing in front of you and said, I'll give you one wish, it's the only one you can ever have in your life, you've got 10 seconds to decide, you can have almost anything you want. What do you want? Or you lose the wish forever. 99% of people answer that question with money, health, something external in the world. And so it's really interesting because, ask one way, people say, I want happiness most. But then you ask it another way, and almost 100% choose something external. So how do those things fit together? To me, Daniel, they fit together. We have bought the lie that the only way I can have the peace is with money to purchase it, or with this or that in my external circumstances. That in other words, my external circumstances will purchase for me those internal things that I really know are what I want most, but I don't think I can have that without the external circumstances. And Daniel, it is an absolute lie.
Mm-hmm. Now, going in beyond the three principles, one of the big things, first of all, I want to touch on is that people are really big about affirmations.
Right.
Now, when you look back at the work you were describing earlier of Dr. Bruce Lipton, I know we've had him on the program a few times, and his research is interesting beyond the idea of biology of belief, and sometimes I wish some people would really look into it a little more about what he was really doing, but
right.
Beyond that, the fact is what he talks a lot about is cellular memory.
Right.
Now, you have that. We also know that in neuroscience, the subconscious mind runs the show. Okay,
right.
That's just how it is. Now, think about that. You have the subconscious mind, which is where 90% of the true action, or even more than that, really occurs. The true outcomes really occur regardless of what you consciously think you're doing or wanting to go. Then you have cellular memory. I mean, you're looking, as you were saying, there was some incredible something octillion, atoms in the human body.
Right.
So you've got that going on. So you've got cellular memory and the subconscious mind. It stands to reason why we have, been shortcoming, I guess is the best way to look at it, from achieving what it is we truly want. So you can see where the work really needs to begin. It needs to begin from the inside.
That's right. But there's another wonderful thing that came out of that for me, Daniel, and it's this. It is not your fault. And what you said about 10 minutes ago, I have found to be true with almost every single person whose life is not going the way they want. They think, okay, it's my fault. It's my fault the multi-level didn't work. It's my fault that I did this self-help book and did it for a year exactly the way they told me and it didn't work. It has to be my fault because it's working for other people. But when you really understand what is running the show, and that it comes from hundreds of years back in my ancestry, it's absorbed from people I'm around, it's learned from people who taught me, it's things I imagined as a 4-year-old that I never really had any rational thought of ever doing or participating in. They were just imaginations, but they become memory then. They're recorded as a memory and become part of my software. Well, when you understand that, you start coming away with this thing, you know what? Guilt and self-condemnation and this is my fault is not only a waste of time usually, it's simply not true according to the science.
Elaborate on that for a little bit if you could.
Well, again, it goes back to what you were saying. Why do you do what you do?
Mm-hmm.
The un- and subconscious mind are more than 1 million times more powerful than the conscious. So, as long as my conscious intention agrees with my subconscious memories, I'm okay. I can do that, all right? If I say, okay, I'm going to have 1 scoop of ice cream and that's it, and my subconscious mind says, yeah, that'll be great. We don't need more than that. 1 scoop is fine. But, on the other hand, if my subconscious mind is saying, no, we're not feeling very good today, we're kind of in pain here, physically or non-physically, and that ice cream distracts us from the pain, and we feel we need more than 1 scoop. Well, I don't even know why I'm doing it, because I started out saying I'm just going to have 1 scoop, but it is then almost impossible for me to not have more, because my subconscious mind, based on a fear-based pain-pleasure memory, is punching the more ice cream button. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like the good angel, bad angel illustration that goes way back. My conscious mind is saying, no, 1 scoop is fine, but the subconscious is not saying that. It's screaming it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is very difficult for me to stop. That's why according to Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, the largest category of book sales almost every single year are diet and weight loss books.
Mm-hmm. Okay?
Who buys the ones this year? The people that bought them last year. Okay? Well, why? Why didn't they just do the ones from last year?
Mm-hmm.
They can't. They can't. They want to, consciously. I was having breakfast with Professor William Tiller from Stanford, who's a good friend of mine, and he was saying, you know what, Alex, everywhere you go these days, and in books and everything, you read about conscious intention. And he said, and that's good. Conscious intention is real, it's very important, but what you almost never hear people talking about is unconscious intention.
Mm-hmm.
And the significance of that is that if your unconscious intention conflicts with your conscious intention, which happens all day long for most of us, your unconscious wins every time. Why? Because the number one job of the unconscious is to protect us from future death. It's part of our survival instinct, and the way the unconscious determines what may lead to death is anything painful, either physically or emotionally. So those memories we have that contain pain or fear or I'm not tall enough or this won't work for me or I'm going to get cancer because Dad did, those memories are prioritized over all other memories. And so anything that might be relevant to those gets tagged and the unconscious takes over. And the unconscious doesn't care if it overreacts. It only cares if it underreacts.
Mm-hmm. I see. That makes enough sense now. What I was surprised about is that you state, and I was really surprised by this, that you began to, over the years, develop a system that had a 97% success rate for people achieving what they want to achieve.
Right.
And that's because you decided to get away from the modality of the outside, I want that will make me happy, to the I need to develop inside of me what it is that I want first. And you're seeing more and more, especially as people, begin to pursue the law of attraction, if they make that little shift, if I work on the internal first,
right,
then the external will easily lay itself down to me. That doesn't mean it'll come right away, but it truly does that. And I know that many years ago, I had read in a book about setting goals, here's the simplicity of it all, because I really got frustrated in the 80s with what all the gurus back then were saying. That when it comes to having a goal, you write the goal down, then you micromanage the goal, you break it down into these individual parts. And I thought to myself, I got other things in the day that I'd rather be doing than messing around with all that work. So this one simple exercise was this. He just simply says, write down the goal. Obviously, we hear write it down as though you actually have it.
Uh-huh.
So you write that down on a little 5x8 card and just tuck it away. Don't even bother with it anymore and go about your day. See, therefore, you eliminate, as you were talking about earlier, the one thing that kills a lot of goals from ever becoming materialized is expectation.
Right.
Now, it's funny how life works because it works on its own schedule as well, but you usually always get what you want. The problem is people don't truly pay attention to what it is they really want on a regular basis. What are you really asking for?
Right.
And if you listen to that self-talk in your mind, you'll realize why things are getting blocked and they're not coming to you. Now, I like that you use the approach of working from the inside out, and you have specific tools that you encourage people to use in your book. Let's talk about how your principles are different now.
Well, one of the first things I think people need to understand when I talk about that 97% success rate is that is very different from how the law of attraction has been typically taught, is that one of the things that I think is really important is having right goals. And so when someone comes to me or to the work that I do and they say, okay, my goal is to be the next Elvis Presley, or my goal is, to be a 60-year-old starting quarterback in the NFL, or my goal is to make $5 million in the next 2 years or whatever, I don't see my job as to say, Oh, great. Okay. Well, then let's go to work to get you that $5 million. Or you know, the
right.
my first step is whoa. Hold the phone a second. Should this be your goal in the first place? And if not, then let's get the goal that should be your goal. So that's my first step, is helping people decide what do they really want most in life, not what they think they want most. What do they really want most? And let's develop a plan to get that goal, not the one that you think you want. And you're right. It is always based on an internal state, not an external circumstance. So that's a very important distinction to me. Once we've helped someone determine what they really want, which determines what their goal should be, then we start using the tools. And the first thing I like to do, Daniel, is to have people for about 40 days simply meditate on 7 principles that I've kind of formulated over the years, that are principles about the 3-step blueprint for the last 75 years that don't work and are really a blueprint for failure, and the new, I'm going to say, emerged blueprint from the latest research about how you truly become successful. So I've got 7 principles, and what I tell every single person is for at least 40 days, just go out there and meditate on these principles. And for more than 50% of people, that's all they'll have to do. Somewhere in the process of 40 days, they will become reprogrammed in their unconscious, and now they will start being successful in a very, very tangible way, and it will manifest to their external circumstances. If that doesn't happen, then I've got 3 tools that I've developed over the years where you can kind of do that manually on demand.
Now, I know one of those tools I was interested to learn, as you were talking about one of the books, Energy Medicine by Donna Eden, was the one, it's the heart position, or the energy medicine tool.
The energy medicine.
Yeah, exactly. You know, where you place both hands over your heart and then you turn it in a counterclockwise and a clockwise position. And you do that for about 3 minutes. But what was interesting about that is how you talked about how even Dr. Sigmund Freud used to use that. Describe what that is, because I tried that and I noticed that if you ever feel anxious or stressed out, anything like that, you do this, it's amazing how this really makes you feel.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until the last 3 years. But I guess it was about 3 years ago. I was surfing around the internet, and sure enough, the energy medicine tool that's part of my book is 3 parts. It's putting the palms of your hand over your forehead, the palms of your hand over the top of your head, and the palms of your hands over your heart. What I discovered is that Sigmund Freud used the palms of the hand on the forehead position. In fact, he said that was his go-to technique, and a direct quote, he said, "It scarcely ever left me in a lurch." And so what he would do is he would put the palm of his hand on his patient's forehead as he was helping them deal with issues. And sure enough, if you try this at home, and you're welcome to, I mean, there's instructions on exactly how to do it with all 3 positions in the book. But the next time you're feeling stressed or dealing with an issue or whatever, just try it. Put the palms of your hand over your forehead, just stacked one hand on top of the other, both palms down on your forehead, and just see if that stress doesn't start to get better and that anger or whatever you're feeling starts to lessen. Or if you're thinking about a memory that's painful, if that starts to diminish some, you can also try putting your hands over your heart, same way, both hands stacked, top of your head. But yeah, that's one of the tools, and most people find it remarkably efficient.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we talked about earlier, affirmations are one of those things people just basically beat themselves to death with.
Right.
And I believe
kind
if
of
I
like
affirm,
the multi-level thing.
but if I say this affirmation enough, that eventually it's going to become true. Now, we had a guest on the program a few years back, and he changed that to what are known as affirmations.
Ah, yeah.
And it's fascinating because when I looked at that, I thought, what he's saying makes a lot of sense, because you're not telling the brain and the cellular memories, as we talked about earlier, what's going to happen. You're asking a question about it.
Right.
And that's where the brain really works. It wants to be engaged in problem solving.
Right.
So that really bypasses the subconscious in a very fast way, in a very conscious way. And you use what's called reprogramming statements.
Right.
Now tell us about that a little bit.
Well, it seems like every decade has its hot thing, kind of both in the traditional or standard and in the complementary or alternative. And I don't remember which decade it was, maybe the 90s or something, where, or maybe it was the decade of 2000, where, man, I was hearing affirmations everywhere. I mean, everywhere. It was just huge. And there was this one person that I was around a good bit, and he had stomach problems. And everywhere we went, he kept saying, my stomach problems are healing right now. My stomach problems are healing right now. My stomach problems are going away. My stomach problems are going away. And this went on for months, and I just couldn't stand it after a while. And I said, is that helping? And at first time I asked him, he said, I really think it is. Well, he kept doing it. Several months later, he's still having stomach problems. I asked him again. He said, you know what, I don't think it is. And so I actually tested for about a year and a half. I used heart rate variability equipment, which is the medical test for the current state of your autonomic nervous system. It's a test for physiological stress. And I would hook people up to a heart rate variability machine and have them say an affirmation that they were already using. And when it was something like that, Daniel, my stomach pain is going away, $1 million is already on the way to me, something like that, their stress would spike. You're just looking at the screen.
Right.
They're hooked up to the machine. You're just sitting there looking at the screen. Say, okay. Now, say your affirmation. They say it. Their stress spikes. They quit saying it. Their stress calms back down. They say it again. Their stress spikes. Well, and it was very consistent over about a year and a half. And I came to the conclusion that their un- and subconscious mind are perceiving that statement as a lie. Because when I started asking people, do you really believe that? Deep in your heart, to the marrow of your bone, do you believe $1 million is on the way to you right now? And typically what they would say, Daniel, is, well, I'm trying to believe it. But if you really pinned them down, well, maybe not. But maybe I don't. But that's what this guy said to do, so that's what I'm doing. Well, your unconscious mind interprets that as a lie, and so it spikes your stress. So I started having people, and I tested this with the medical test too, say, okay, let's quit saying that, because look at the screen for yourself. Every time you say that, it spikes your stress. So let's try this. Instead of my stomach pain is healing, say, I would like for my stomach pain to heal, and I ask for my stomach pain to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they would say that, and it wouldn't spike. In fact, a lot of times their stress level would decrease some.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So that's where I came to reprogramming statements, which are saying things that you truly believe in the direction of change that you're trying to help facilitate in your life. And what typically happens is someone can say, you know, I'm asking that my stomach pain heals, so I'm asking my brain and my nervous system and my chemicals and hormones to all work together to please heal that, or you pray it. And then, very often, the person starts over time to feel a little better, say, okay, let me ask you this. Do you believe now that it's getting some better? I say, well, yeah, I do. It has been feeling a lot better. Okay, now let's hook you up to the stress test, and you say, I believe my stomach pain is getting better. And at that point, they can say it, and it doesn't spike their stress. It often diminishes their stress. So that's kind of where that came from, Daniel.
Mm-hmm. Now, I like that you use the word belief. That's very powerful, because in conjunction with you talking about how we go about the old modality of achieving goals causes tremendous stress. And pretty much any doctor will tell you this day and age that most diseases and sicknesses occur because it's about 95 to 97% stress related. So you're actually the cause of your own sickness, it seems like, you know, depending on, you know, how you live your life. But one of the things that's interesting about belief is when you look at the ancient modalities, if you will, and even in indigenous cultures of healing, belief is one of the most powerful things they use in healing an individual. Now, it's so powerful, here's what they do. We typically, here in the West, something comes along, an ache, a pain, a sickness, you go to the doctor and you say, heal me. So you're literally throwing all of your trust that the doctor, with all the education that they have, is going to be able to achieve this goal. Well, if that was true, then how come cancer has a 1% success rate, from what I understand here in the United States, of being healed? Okay.
Right.
Now, taking a look back to the indigenous ways of healing, what happens is the shaman or witch doctor, whatever he may be called, gathers together the family and the immediate community, because these people were big about community. And they said, I'm asking you all to participate in helping to heal this individual. But the question now comes to the individual, what is your desire for healing here? In other words, more than 90% of the healing process is placed on the individual who needs to be healed and the supporting community that surrounds this person. Now, you were actually alluding to in a book, in your book, Beyond Willpower, about an interesting experiment that really shows scientifically how true that way really is when it comes to being effective, with an experiment that Albert Einstein conducted. Tell us about that one.
Well, are you talking about the action at a distance?
Yes.
Yeah, when I was first told about this experiment, I think it was by Bruce, actually. We did a couple of joint events together, and it was probably 12 years ago. It absolutely blew me away. And it's one of the most famous experiments in history. I believe it was done in 1935 by Albert and two of his colleagues, Dr. Podasky and Rosen. And what they did is they would, for instance, at least this is the way it was described to me, and if you look it up on the internet, it's called a thought experiment. They took two people, hey, my name's Alex, and I live in Tennessee. Your name is Daniel, and you live, I'm not sure where you live, Daniel, but you live
Northwest, Portland, Oregon.
Okay, Portland. And I mean, just sort of very cursory things. And then both of us would be separated and put in a Faraday cage, and in a Faraday cage, normal electricity and energy can't get through, but quantum energy can. And in that Faraday cage, we would be hooked up to pulse rate, galvanic skin response, EEG, whatever was available at that time that measured functioning, basically a stress test. And then with one person, they shone a pin light in the person's eyes, which causes neurological activity to just go nuts. So all the needles on the machine start going crazy. With the other person, they did absolutely nothing. And neither one had any idea what they were doing, if anything, with the other person. The fascinating thing is that at the instant they shone the pin light in one person's eyes and the needles started going crazy, the other person who's just relaxing has the needles start going crazy on that person's machine as well, as if they were shining the pin light in that person's eyes, only they weren't. And because of that, this experiment has commonly taken on the name of spooky action at a distance, and has been replicated many times with similar results. And if you just want to kind of get under the skin of a physicist and you're ever in a conversation, start asking them about spooky action at a distance, and they'll probably start putting their head in their hands. But anyway, the point being that with people that we are even just casually connected to, there is a transfer of information at the energy quantum level that affects the physiology of both of us. It's like an invisible Wi-Fi, an invisible human Wi-Fi, and we're connected. So, I can help be a positive influence, Daniel, on your health and physiology and emotions and all that sort of thing, or I can be a negative influence, and the same you for me.
Mm-hmm. Now you see also one of the external circumstances that keep people back from getting to where they want to be.
Absolutely, that's right.
That's why I wanted to bring that up with the statements of desire, because I wanted people to understand. Look, you may want to move this change, make this change, and you see it even in we describe the network marketing industry, and again, not to pick on it, it's a business model that obviously works. It's been around for a long time, but the fact is, most people who go into it, all of a sudden, their immediate community has a strong influence on whether they succeed or fail.
That's right. That's right. And the old adage, be careful who your friends are.
Right.
Well, this takes that to a whole another level. Be careful who your coworkers are. Be careful who, because you're connected to each other.
See, I find one of the most interesting observations about that is this. A lot of people would love to become multimillionaires because they see or perceive these people have this jet-set lifestyle with all the time in the world to do nothing but spend their money. So you become, let's say, that multimillionaire, and you actually did it through the lottery. So you feel the next thing I need to do is move into the neighborhood the Kardashians live in. Okay? But you find yourself tremendously out of place. Well, first of all, the Kardashians, maybe their mother worked for it, but for the most part, it's sort of inherited wealth in some ways, like a lot of that area may be, okay? And it's an opinion that I have. But you move into this neighborhood and you're surrounded by a lot of people who have inherited wealth. Well, you still have that old-fashioned work ethic, so you really feel out of place. It's only a matter of time before eventually, for instance, like in the Flintstones cartoon, you realize this isn't my neighborhood and I'm unhappy and I'm done.
Right.
And that's why you go back to setting, more authentic goals that are more in line with who you are and what your life purpose is. Finally, what I'd like you to do, if you could, for our listeners, is talk about what the heart screen tool is briefly.
Yeah. I love to end with that. Thank you, Daniel. everything that has ever been created by the hands of man was first in someone's imagination. And I don't even like to call it the imagination, because the idea we get from that is daydreaming. And I'm not talking about that aspect of the imagination. I'm talking about what I would call the image maker, where we imagine building a chair and then we build it. Or we imagine doing laundry and then we go do it. Or we imagine, hey, you know what? I kind of like that girl. I think I'm going to call her and see if she might like to go to dinner with me. And then something comes of that. And no one I know of, which is very unusual, would dispute any of that. And in fact, Dr. Antonio Damasio, MD, PhD, head of the neuro department at the University of Southern California, who, by the way, is being mentioned in the same sentence with Nobel Prize recently, says that imageless thought is impossible. That we cannot have a thought or a feeling unless we have an image that those thoughts and feelings come from somewhere in our database, somewhere in our unconscious or subconscious. So the heart screen tool, I'm calling it heart because the first mention I find of it is from 3,000 years ago with Solomon, who said, guard your heart above everything else, for from it comes all of the issues of life. And he's not talking about the pump heart. He's talking about the I love you with all my heart. And so I call it the heart screen because of that. But it's the imagination, it's the image maker. And so this is not a metaphor. You have a screen inside of your mind. Unconscious, subconscious, conscious, all of the above. It's in all of them. But you have a screen, and whatever is on that screen, you feel based on that, you think based on that, and you do based on that, okay? Mm-hmm. So what I did with clients over the years is have them take control, which almost no one has ever even thought of doing, of their image maker, of their heart screen. And here's how it works. You've got a part of that is conscious, which means you can see what's on it. Think about what you had for lunch or breakfast maybe, depending on what part of the country you're living in. Close your eyes. Can you see what you had for lunch? Can you see what you ate? Go outside, look at a flower, and then close your eyes. Can you still see the flower? Yeah, that's your image maker, okay? Now that's your conscious, the conscious part of your image maker. Here's the thing, though. If you are experiencing anger, you can be guaranteed that on the unconscious part of your image maker, there's an anger memory that is being activated and called up to the screen, just like on your computer, because your unconscious mind is saying somehow this anger memory is relevant to something going on in Alex's life right now, okay? So what I help people do is use the conscious part of their image maker or heart screen to help heal the negative that is on the unconscious part, the part they can't see of their image maker or heart screen. And it works very, very well when you do it right. And when you heal that anger memory that's on the unconscious part, guess what? Consciously, you quit feeling the anger. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. So it's really like shooting a bow and arrow. Anybody can learn to do it with practice, but once you start using this, it's the most powerful meditation I've ever seen.
There you go. We've given tools for our listeners. Of course, there's a lot more that they can see and read and experience in your book, Beyond Willpower. And I know on your website you've got a lot going on there people can also indulge in as well. Tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, if you're just interested in the book, you want to see some free videos, some magazine articles about it, you can go to beyondwillpowernow.com. We also have a nonprofit we're starting that has nothing to do with anyone buying anything. It's just about us wanting to help as many people as we can. And if you're interested in the nonprofit, that's at beyondwillpowertogether.com.
And you also have dralexanderlloyd.com as well, correct?
That is right.
Okay.
That's right. And that has some other products and services that we do as a company.
Oh, very good. Well, Dr. Alexander Lloyd, I want to first thank you for being on our program today. And did you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, but Daniel, thank you. This has been one of the more fun interviews I've done. Thank you so very much.
Well, look, the bottom line to achieving success and goals is if it isn't fun, then what are you doing it for?
Amen. Amen. That's right.
Thank you so much for being on the program today. What a pleasure.
Thank you, Daniel.
You bet. And we want to thank you, the listeners out there. You can find out more also by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. Also encourage you to sign up for our free weekly e-news updates. Also follow us on Twitter at Beyond50Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.